Everton broke the rules. They were caught. They were punished. 6 points deducted. A sanction that sent shockwaves through English football and dominated the back pages for weeks. And most people thought that was it. Everton paid the price, move on. They were wrong. Because on the 10th of June 2026, a Premier League Independent Commission issued a ruling that changes the financial landscape of English football permanently. Everton have been ordered to pay Burnley compensation. Not a points deduction, not a fine paid to the league, a direct payment from club to club for financial damage caused by breaking the rules. The reported total, close to £40 million. £40 million paid by Everton to Burnley because Everton overspent and a commission ruled that Burnley paid the price for it. Everton have appealed and say that the ruling is flawed in law and fact. This is not over. But the ruling exists. The precedent exists. And what it means for every club in this league, every owner, every boardroom, every executive who has ever pushed at the edges of the financial rules is something nobody in football is ready to fully reckon with yet. This is that story. To actually understand why Burnley had a case at all, you need to go back to one season. 2021-22. The Premier League table, final day. Everton finished 16th. Burnley finished 18th. 4 points between them. Here's the detail that matters. Burnley had a better goal difference than Everton. They went down anyway, because in the league table, points come first, and Everton had 4 more of them. Now, here's where the story starts. The following year, in March 2023, the Premier League launched a complaint about Everton's finances for the period up to June 2022, the same period that the 2021-22 season fell within. The investigation found that Everton had breached profit and sustainability rules, the financial limits every Premier League club must stay within. Their breach was ultimately treated as £19.5 million over the permitted threshold of £105 million. In November 2023, 16 months after Burnley had already been relegated, Everton were deducted 10 points, reduced to 6 points on appeal in February 2024. Burnley had been in the Championship for a year and a half before the punishment arrived. That delay, that gap between the breach and the sanction, that is the crack Burnley walked through. Because Burnley looked at the table, looked at those 4 points, and asked a question that nobody in football had formally put to a commission before. If Everton had been operating within the rules, would we still have gone down? Here is what PSR actually means in one sentence. Premier League clubs cannot lose more than £105 million in a 3-year reporting period. That's the limit, and the theory behind it is very straightforward. If every club operates within the same financial constraints, then nobody gets an unfair sporting advantage by overspending. The problem, as Burnley have exposed, is that the punishment for breaking those rules has always been applied to the club that broke them. A points deduction, a fine, a sporting sanction. What the punishment has never done, until now, is compensate the clubs that were damaged by the breach. Burnley's argument was precise. Everton overspent by £19.5 million. That overspend funded a squad. That squad helped Everton stay in the Premier League. Burnley, who had a better goal difference, went down instead. They didn't just suffer a sporting setback, they suffered a financial one. Relegation from the Premier League costs a club somewhere in the region of £100 million in lost revenue. Broadcasting money, commercial deals, prize money, gate receipts, sponsorship uplift that disappears the moment you drop out of the top flight. Burnley's argument was not just that they deserved to stay up, it was that they could put a number on what going down had cost them. The Commission agreed, in principle, that this argument was valid. And that is the moment that everything changed. The case was heard over 10 hearing days between September and October 2025. Burnley sought £51.7 million in compensation. Everton's defence was direct. We already received a sporting sanction. The points deduction was the punishment. You can't punish us twice for the same breach. They also disputed causation, arguing that their overspend did not directly cause Burnley's relegation, that football results are not that simple, that you cannot draw a straight line from a financial breach to a final league table. It is not an unreasonable argument, but the Commission didn't accept it. They found that Everton's breach had begun before the end of the 2021-22 season, that the overspend had a cumulative sporting effect, that the timing meant Burnley were entitled to pursue their claim. The Commission's assessment: £26 million in compensation before interest, with interest reported at £9.1 million up to July 2025. The total reported figure has landed close to £40 million. Everton dispute every part of this. They have appealed. Their position is that the ruling is dangerous, unworkable, and wrong in law. They may yet win that appeal. But here is what cannot be appealed away. A Premier League independent commission has now formally accepted that a financial rule breach can cause quantifiable, compensable loss for a rival club. That finding, regardless of what happens to Everton specifically, will never disappear. Here is what most coverage of this story has missed. The headline is £40 million. Everton pay Burnley, Burnley get compensated, story over. But the £40 million is not the story. The story is what the £40 million represents. For the first time in the history of English football's financial rules, a club has been required to pay direct compensation to a rival for the sporting and financial damage caused by them breaking the rules. That is not a points deduction. That is not a fine that disappears into the league's accounts. It's a bill, addressed to a specific club, paid to a specific victim. And the moment that that principle exists, the moment a commission has accepted that loss can be quantified and compensated, every future financial breach in English football carries a new risk that simply did not exist before. Think about what can now be argued. A club overspends and finishes above a rival on the final day. The rival misses out on European football. European football is worth tens of millions of pounds in broadcast revenue, prize money, and commercial uplift. A club breaches the rules, and the team that drops them into the relegation zone because of it loses £100 million in Premier League income. A title race decided by 2 points. One club spent beyond the rules. The other missed a Champions League spot, and everything that comes with it. Every one of those scenarios now has a legal framework. A commission has said, this loss can be priced. This damage can be compensated. The points deduction was punishment for the club that cheated. The compensation claim is the punishment for what they did to everybody else. So where does this end? The honest answer is nobody knows, because nothing like this has happened before. But here is the question every boardroom in the Premier League is now sitting with. If breaking financial rules can generate a direct compensation claim from a rival, what's the actual cost of non-compliance? Until now, the calculation was simple. Break the rules, risk a points deduction, factor in whether that deduction hurts you more than the overspend has helped you. Some clubs, if you read between the lines of how financial breaches have been handled, appear to have already made that calculation. They spent beyond their limits, accepted the sanction, stayed up, and survived. But that calculation just got significantly more complicated, because a points deduction is a one-time sporting cost. A compensation claim from a rival club is open-ended. It depends on what the breach has cost them. And the Premier League has 90 clubs outside of the top flight who could, in theory, argue that they were damaged by a breach that affected either promotion, relegation, or prize money. Now, handle the big question carefully, because the evidence does not yet support anything stronger than this. Manchester City are currently facing the most extensive set of alleged financial rule breaches in English football history. City have denied all wrongdoing, but no outcome has been reached. The case remains unresolved. But if, and this is a significant if City are ever found to have breached financial rules at scale, Rival clubs and their lawyers will now look at the Everton and Burnley precedent and ask a question. Can we put a number on what this has cost us? The Everton ruling has not answered the question for City, but it has made the question possible to ask in a way that is simply not there before. Here's the bigger picture. Profit and sustainability rules were built on a simple idea: create a financial level playing field, stop clubs spending money that they don't have, prevent the kind of collapse that destroyed Portsmouth, Leeds, and Bradford. Noble intention, and for most clubs, for most of the time, the rules work. But the enforcement mechanism has always had a gap. The gap is this: the punishment lands on the club that broke the rules, not on the damage the breach caused elsewhere. A points deduction hurts Everton. It does not help Burnley. A fine paid to the Premier League goes into the league's funds. It does not reach the club that missed out on survival, or Europe, or a title. For 15 years, that gap existed and nobody exploited it. Partly because nobody thought to. Partly because the legal framework was untested. Partly because the cost of pursuing a claim was uncertain. Burnley tested it and won, which means the gap is now closed. Every future breach carries the risk of a direct compensation claim. Every boardroom making financial decisions at the edge of the rules now has to factor in not just the league's punishment, but the potential bill from the clubs that their breach have damaged. That is a fundamental change to the financial risk calculation in English football. Whether it makes clubs more compliant or simply more creative in hiding non-compliance, only time will tell. But the landscape has changed, and it changed because of a club that went down by 4 points and decided to do something that nobody had done before. They came back for the money. So here's where this ends. Not with a verdict on Everton, not with a prediction on the appeal, with a question that goes far beyond the case. English football spent 15 years building financial rules designed to create fairness. But fairness, it turns out, is not just about punishing the club that cheated. It's about compensating the clubs that were cheated. Burnley just proved that those are two different things, and that only one of them was being done. The points deduction told the world that Everton broke the rules. The compensation ruling told the world what breaking those rules actually costs. And now, every owner sitting in a boardroom, every executive looking at the accounts, every financial director modelling whether the overspend is worth the risk, has to answer a question that they've never had to answer before. Not just, what does the league do to us if we cheat, but what do our rivals come for? Football has had financial rules for 15 years. It has had financial consequences for 15 days. If this gave you a new way of seeing what financial rule breaking actually costs in modern football, give it a like. It genuinely helps the channel grow. Subscribe to Sports Cash Files. Every week, we look at the money behind the sport. And drop it in the comments. Is this the ruling that finally makes financial fair play work? Or will clubs find a way around it? And if Manchester City are ever found guilty, what does this precedent mean for the clubs that finish below them? Thanks for watching. See you in the next one.